Welcome back to Worship in the Trenches. I'm Josh Sahulik, and this is where Sunday's worship meets Monday morning. In April of 1521, a German monk stands in a room packed with some of the most powerful men in Europe. You see, Martin Luther had spent years before that day trying to earn God's favor, whether he was fasting, confession, penance, sleepless nights of prayer, and it seemed the harder he worked, the wider the gap between himself and a holy God. It seemed to grow. What finally broke it open for him was Paul's letter to the Romans, the discovery that Abraham was counted righteous, not because he performed, but because he believed. So when Luther stood there in front of these powerful men and refused to recant, he was standing on the same ground that Abraham stood on when he left Haran. Both men had heard God speak, and both walked forward with almost nothing in hand except God's promise. The single thread runs through this week's 4 readings from Genesis all the way to Romans. It starts in Genesis 12, where God tells Abraham to leave his country and his family and his father's house, and in exchange, God offers a promise. He says, "I will make you a great nation, and through you all the families of the earth will be blessed." Abraham, at this point, is 75. He has no children, and the land he's going to is occupied by strangers. Yet he goes. You see, there's no law yet, there's no temple, no sacrificial system, no priesthood. There's simply a man who heard God speak and had the faith to believe him. So fast forward to the prophet Hosea. Abraham's descendants, they have all of those things mentioned earlier. They have the law of Moses, the temple of Solomon, the sacrifices, the whole religious machine. And God looks at the operation and grieves. He says, "Your love is like the morning dew that disappears before noon." So you see, they had the right words, their prayers were beautiful, but the trust and faith underneath had evaporated. And then the line Jesus would quote in the Gospels, "To the Pharisees, I desire steadfast love and not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings." You see, these people in Hosea's day, they kept the machinery running long after the faith and power had died. And then in Matthew chapter 9, Jesus walks past a tax collector. He says 2 words to a collaborator named Matthew, "Follow me." And Matthew gets up. It's the exact same shape of Genesis chapter 12. God speaks, a person believes, and a life is changed. And then Jesus sits down to eat with the very people that the religious system had boxed out. And when the objections come, he answers with Hosea, "I desire mercy, not sacrifice." He's drawn to faith wherever he finds it, in a bleeding woman who reaches for the edge of his coat, and in a desperate father who's kneeling in the dust for his child. And now we come to Paul, who ties it together in Romans chapter 4. He takes us all the way back to Abraham and says the promise rested on grace, received through faith, so that it could belong to everyone who believes. And then he turns and points at us. Those words, "It was counted to him as righteousness," were written for you too, for everyone who trusts the God who raised Jesus from the dead. So 1 thread, 4 scriptures, 1 God. The same God who named a few weeks back as a Father, Son, and Spirit, who has always wanted to be known and trusted, and not merely serviced. So what does this mean for those of us in the trenches, Monday through Saturday? Well, if you're a pastor or a ministry leader, hear Hosea carefully. The temptation isn't to abandon the machine, it's to keep it polished while the heart gets cold. The service runs, the volunteers are scheduled, the slides advance on cue. Ask yourself whether your own faith looks like Abraham, or just like a well-maintained piece of equipment. If you're a volunteer, remember that your work matters. But mercy, not sacrifice, is the most important. The setup, the sound check, the hospitality, those flow from trusting God. They were never meant to be a substitute for trusting God. And if you're sitting in the pew this week wondering whether you've done enough, hear this. Abraham had nothing to show but a promise, and he built his whole life on it. So if you're exhausted from trying to earn what God already offers as a free gift, the invitation is simple. Stop performing and start trusting. Call on him, and he will hear your cry. The method has never changed from Genesis to Romans. God speaks, God promises, and the one who trusts that promise is then counted righteous. That's the faith that God has always desired. So a few questions to ask yourself this week. Where in your life are you performing for God instead of trusting him? And is there a place where you've kept the machinery running while your heart has grown cold underneath? What promise of God are you being asked to walk toward with very little else in hand? And finally, who around you has been boxed out by the systems that you serve in? And what would mercy look like there? Thanks for joining me in the trenches this week. It's my privilege to stand shoulder to shoulder with you.